Hi again. Very good morning to everyone. So my name is Sumant, and we'll just do a discussion about the book Range by David Epstein. So I'll just give you a background of the book about the author to build some curiosity around it. So David Epstein is the author of the Sports Zine, which is another wonderful book, and he has a master's degrees in environmental science and journalism, and he's more inclined towards sports. So maybe that is the reason there are a lot of examples related to sports in this book. So the book range is about learning, education, and jobs. Right? It's heavily driven, research driven, with a lot of real world examples. So if you ask me, the first reaction I had after reading the book was that I should call up my nephew, and ask him not to dive into any specific field right away, and rather get an experience in multiple fields in the beginning and have a sampling period, and then maybe start focusing on any one particular field. So this was like a complete perception shift I had experienced after I read the book. So this is how we'll structure the discussion. I'll share four distinct themes which I sort of could identify from the book. Around 3 to 4 minutes, I'll speak on each theme, and yeah, please do feel free to dive into the discussion whenever you want to, or leave questions, which we can take up towards the end. So, right, so are we good to go? Cool.
Yep, I think so.
Right. So the first theme which the author shares is about wicked versus kind learning environments. Right. So wicked learning environments are those that don't come with a defined rules for problem solving, whereas a kind world environment is based on repeating patterns on rules. For example, in the current context, if I have to draw certain examples from the current world, startups, for example, are a wicked domain for learning, which I am also part of, and I can vouch for that. Whereas sports like chess, golf, etc., which are bound by very concrete rules, are kind learning environments where the feedback is quick and accurate. Right. So the current world is not so kind, is what the author says, and it requires thinking that cannot fall back on previous experience. For example, expert firefighters, for example, when they are faced with a new situation like fire in a skyscraper or a completely new environment, so they suddenly feel deprived of the intuition formed in the years of managing house fires and are prone to poor decisions. So even chess masters too find that the skill they took years to build is suddenly obsolete sometimes. So there is an interesting study done by Chris Agris, who had studied consultants from top tier institutions for 15 years, and then he identified that the consultants were really doing really well on a host of business problems, which were well defined and had clear boundaries. Whereas when it comes to dealing with open-ended problems, they had faltered. So this is what that author calls as single loop learning. This is the kind that favors the first familiar solution that comes to mind, right? So when you have experience in one particular field, what the author says is that you are more prone to using solutions from that particular field and not being able to think outside that field, which is a limitation in the current world of things. So in wicked domains that lack automatic feedback, experience does not lead to improved performance, right? Which is pretty obvious. And effective habits of mind are important, and they can be developed. So the whole takeaway from this piece is that uh, there are wicked learning environments, and then there are kind learning environments, right? So the current world largely is a wicked learning environment where experience in one field doesn't equate to increased performance, or rather we should be looking at connecting dots across different fields. So the second theme is about the nature of education, right? So what the author says is that the breadth of training predicts breadth of transfer. And what do we mean by the breadth of training? Is that uh, the more context in which something is learned, the more the learner creates abstract models, and the less they rely on any particular example. So learners become better at applying their knowledge to a situation they have never seen before, which is the essence of creativity. I think most of you would agree to that. One very interesting perspective that came out was the kind of questions which we are taught in our classroom, right? So there are two kinds of questions. One is connection based and the other is procedural, or a way of saying one is pattern based and the other is formula based. Just imagine uh, uh, just imagine giving a formula to a group of school kids and then asking them to solve problems, right? So the outcome is very immediate, and then you see results. But in the long term, it would not help them solve other problems, or rather, just contrarily, if you just give them a pattern and then ask them to derive a problem from there, which is more making it more connection based, making the learning more connection based, right? So they struggle in the beginning in identifying the problems, right, and solving them. But the learning can be applied. It is more malleable to be applied in other contexts. So this should be the essence of learning, is what the author says. So there was a similar study conducted in recently, where students were asked to where students were given words and then the definition of those words, right? So one set of students were given the definition to the word. For example, uh, to discuss something in order to come to an agreement is what we call negotiation, right? This is what one set of students were told, and the other set of students, uh, the definition was given, and then they're asked to come up with the uh, sorry. So right, so they were given the definition, and then they were asked to come up with different words that can fit that definition. So initially, the students struggled, but later, the set of students who were asked to make connections based out of the definition actually proved to be better performing than the other set of students. So the whole summary of this story is that being forced to generate answers improves subsequent learning, even if generated answers are wrong. So this is an effect called hypercorrelation effect, which says the more wrong you are when you are trying to find out the answer, the more stickiness it has with you. The right answer has more stickiness with you. For example, when I have certain preconceptions in my mind and then they are proved to be false at some point in time, it makes me realize the true answers and remember and recollect them much more in a better way compared to uh, not having that correlation. So psychologists call this block practice. That is practicing the same thing repeatedly, each problem employing the same procedure. So as I've said, it leads to excellent immediate performance, but for knowledge to be flexible, it should be learned under varied conditions. So there is a very beautiful term defining this whole thing. It is called interleaving. I think some of you might want to dig deep into that later. So you can just note it down, interleaving. There is a whole host of research concerning interleaving and then how is it used in different fields, right? So, right. So the other says when our intuition always asks us to do block practice because that's the easiest way to uh, that's like a shortcut which our brain always asks us to follow. But probably whenever our brain asks us to do block practice, we should opt for interleaving for a more sustained learning process. So the third theme is about thinking outside the domain, right? So Dedry Jertner is an analogical thinker in the Northeastern University, and then he puts it very beautifully. So the human's ability to think rationally is one of the reasons we are running on the planet. Relationally is one of the reasons we are running the planet. Relations are really hard for other species, right? So, so what the author says is that students might learn about molecules by analogy to billiard ball collisions, and principles of electricity can be understood with the analogies to water flow through plumbing. And most recently, the computer scientists have started studying the neural networks in brain, right, to simulate the same things in computer programs. And one interesting thing is that analogies work the best when they are farthest from the event which they are compared with. Say, for example, if the event, if the analogy which we are trying to bring into the discussion, say which we are comparing with the event, is farther away, it actually allows us to have a lot of different approaches on the way to reaching that event. So there is also a beautiful story about Kepler. I think in the interest of time, I won't be able to cover it, but yeah, you should probably look into that. There's also one more analogy which he talks about Napoleon. So Napoleon during one of the war times had actually faced a problem where armies could carry only very limited set days of provisions, and then he had announced a reward for anyone who comes with an idea for food preservation. So interestingly, all the scientists had failed, but there was one food connoisseur called Nicholas Appert who actually prevailed. So this he actually paved way for the whole industry of canned food. So there's also an interesting effect called Instellung effect. It's a psychology term for the tendency of problem solvers to employ only familiar methods, even if better ones are available. I think this is something which we face every day in our jobs. So the other theme, the last theme, is about dropping familiar tools. Right. So this is one thing which I had sort of connected with more than anything else. So often in the case of group meetings, where the person who made the PowerPoint slide puts data in front of you, and we often just use the data put in people in front of us. Like we don't do a good job in saying is the data that we want to make the decision with, right? So most of the times we just make decisions based on what we know or what we have access to, rather than trying to look outside the domain and then and asking for additional data points, right? So there is one more analogy from the work context. So we often say in our jobs that if I feel like I don't have data to back me up, my boss' opinion is better than mine. So this is something which I have faced most of the times. For example, if I have a hunch or something which is very subjective, and I don't have enough data points to back it up, I always feel that uh, I don't feel a strong urge to put it forward. But what the other says is that more than qualitative quantitative, the qualitative hunches also uh, have to be preserved for discussion. So there's one more there is one very interesting example about the Challenger debacle which NASA had experienced. So NASA is very popular as a organization which follows data backed decision making, right? But this had actually come back to bite them in the form of a Challenger voyage, which had actually failed, where a simple shift from uh, data oriented decision making to a qualitative decision making was not possible in the case of NASA because of the culture. So that is, I mean, that is one example which you can always look into and dig deep. That there's a whole business case study around that. So yeah, so there is also one research on aviation accidents which the author talks about. So there was a common pattern which was found that the crew's decision to continue with their original plan, in spite of with their original plan and not being able to think outside their plan, was the one of the major reasons why a lot of aviation accidents have happened. So so the point here is that consensus is nice to have. I mean, no doubt about that. But we shouldn't be optimizing happiness. We should be optimizing decisions, right? I mean, this is something which I had actually reflected on. So there are a lot of times where we sort of optimize for consensus, where is my boss agreeing to what I'm saying? Is my team agreeing to what I'm saying? Is everyone else, all the stakeholders are agreeing to what I'm saying or not? Is something which we think about always. But I mean, we should not be optimizing happiness. There's this one very important, very funny saying where which goes like this, right? So if you want to make everyone happy, sell ice cream and not go into business. So there is one closing remark which the author puts out that I'll just read it quote unquote. Compare yourself to yourself yesterday, not to younger people who aren't you. Everyone progresses at a different rate, so don't let anyone else make you feel behind. You probably don't even know where you're going, so feeling behind doesn't help. Instead, as Herminia Ibarra suggested for the proactive pursuit of match quality, start planning experiments. Your personal version of Friday night or Saturday morning experiments, perhaps. Mental meandering and personal experimentation are sources of power, and head starts are overrated. Right. So, me being a generalist in my job, actually felt a lot of times that being a generalist was a weakness. But this book had actually bust that myth, that reassuring that being a journalist is not a weakness but rather a strength and a virtue to keep. So mostly this is the summary which I wanted to cover. We can start we I mean we it's open for discussion now. We can I'll just read out the questions if there are any. Yes, Mo, understanding is better than rote learning. Correct. I mean, how the education was imparted in 1980s or 90s is not something that can work out in the current day, right? So the world itself has moved to knowledge learning, and yeah, the education practices have to follow that whole premise rather than uh, going back to age-old practices of rote learning.
Sumant, quick comment if it's okay to make
Sure,
one.
Anurag.
I think the observation around making space for qualitative judgments and decision making was very interesting, right? And I think many times in the world of data, it becomes like a heuristic, right, to talk about data back decisions and not allowing enough of your intuition and enough of your qualitative judgment to come into place, right? So creating a formal space for qualitative point of views and intuition to play a role in decision making is interesting because it often gets ruled out simply because it's not backed by loads of data, right? So I thought that's a very interesting one. The second point you made around the breadth of learning is equal to the breadth of transfer, right? I think fantastic point, right? Which is just how do we draw people out of this continuously depth mindset, right, where people just keep investing more and more time in their subject of expertise rather than kind of looking across laterally and finding knowledge from different fields so that you can apply it in different contexts, right? I thought very, very nice point, right? So those two I think stood out for me. Yeah, very, very nice.
Thanks, Anurag. I think regarding the point one, I forgot to share one very interesting thing. So, what the author says is that there are two levels of hierarchy in any company, like the formal hierarchy and the informal hierarchy. So, as the company grows, your formal hierarchy takes over the informal hierarchy. Right? The informal hierarchy is where all these qualitative discussions happen, and then they have this whole area has to be fostered to be able to take better decisions within any organization. And the startups, right, which the current age startups, there is a lot of informal hierarchy which is encouraged, and a lot of informal discussions which are encouraged by the employees. And in uh, these discussions are the ones where the qualitative sort of hunches and ideas and all of these.
Interesting. Akash, you want to talk about your review that you wrote on this book?
Yeah, thank you. I wrote a summary. I just shared the link. But what I found again, similar. My journey is similar to that of Sumant. I am in a generalist role. Actually, I moved from a specialist role to generalist role over the last three years. And just as I was beginning to feel, about some apprehensions about, whether this continuing in the generalist role will really reap any dividend or not. Then I at that point I read this book, and it totally gave me a totally different perspective. For starters, what I totally admire about this book is this book provided a very strong antithesis, in my opinion, to the much popularized 10,000 hour rule concept that I think some of you are familiar with. Malcolm Gladwell shared it in one of his books. where the focus was about, invest as much time into anything with that dedication and practice, and you will turn out to be an expert, and it will reap like very big dividends and all that. But I think this book serves as an antithesis to that, because everybody ends up kind of, specializing in those areas which the David views as more like trenches, from which they rarely get to, put their neck out to get a much broader or rudimentary understanding of other domains and disciplines. And a lot of times, as Suman shared, right, today's problems, or the solutions to today's problems, uh, probably most of them lie in the bridges that lie between these trenches, not just exclusively in those trenches. So becoming a generalist actually has that advantage where you can, pick up some concept from one domain, then experiment and apply it in a different domain to see uh, what solutions emerge. It's like holding a prism to light and seeing, okay, each turn of the prism, what kind of different color of light that it really throws up. That's the way I would really look at it. So I found it like extremely illuminating. This book, it changed the whole perspective around careers, and how we should really pivot, and for the new world actually.
That's great, Akash. I think a lot of valid points have been brought up by you. Anyone else who wants to speak up can just join in.
I think we can put this out also as a review of the book, right? I'll find a way of putting it down in Amazon or somewhere, right? This brilliant discussion on the book.
Sure,
Yeah,
Anurag.
yeah,
That
absolutely.
works.
Absolutely.